I get over there that day. Les Sinclair's the booker. Merv Griffin comes up to me and says, listen, I got to tell you, this audience is all old people from the Jewish old folks home, Jewish retirement home. I'm like, why is he telling me this? I've got a Merv Griffin set. Couldn't be safer. Nothing, I never would do anything anti-Semitic anyway, but I don't even know why he's telling me this. It didn't make sense until we get back to the curtain. Diane Cannon's out there, the actress Diane Cannon, and she's promoting her new movie. It's called Jenny's War. And they show a clip, and it's her in a concentration camp being beat up by Nazis. World War II movie. And then the clip stops, and Merv goes, that's powerful work, Diane. Let's bring out our next entertainer. And they introduced me. And I might as well have goose stepped out onto that stage, man. I'm blonde hair, blue eyed. Here comes the jokes. You will laugh at the jokes. Jordan. And they're in shock. They are in shock. And I do my first joke. I get nothing. And I remember Jerry Seinfeld said, if you ever are performing on a talk show and you drop a joke, it doesn't get a laugh. Just stare at the lead camera, nod your head and pause for a second, smile. To give them a chance that they'll put in the laughter later. So just pace it for the laughter. I did that every joke.
This is Coops Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coops Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. This is episode number 10, and I want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Laurel Lanes. They're down there on Route 73 in Maple Shade. Laurel Lanes is the ultimate entertainment center. They have 60 lanes of bowling. They have a state-of-the-art arcade game set up. They have a private luxury suite. They have something for everybody, and it's great for corporate events. It's great for birthday parties or just a night out in town. And then they have a bar called Splits Bar and Grill, where I host a networking event called Cocktails with Cooper. And you can go there. They have great food, awesome drinks. They have an excellent happy hour every Monday through Friday through 4 to 7. You can do fun events once a month like karaoke and beer pong. And if you host a networking event, go there, host your networking event. And your first one, they'll give 10% back to the charity of your choice. So it's a great venue. Check it out. And when you're leaving, stop by Lickety Splits. It's their handcrafted ice cream place. They have excellent ice cream flavors. They have ones with alcohol. I actually had bourbon butter pecan, and it was good. So check them out. Go to laurelLanesNJ.com, and that's it. Anyway, talking about New Jersey, we got my buddy. It's funny. I was thinking about how I met my guest. And he's done Cooper Talk like 5 times. He was just in town. We met, and we got these subs that were humongous. And I think I had like 3 meals. And I figured out how I met him. Years ago, he was in a movie called I Am Comic. And the director, Jordan Brady, was on Cooper Talk in LA. And I knew Ritch because I'm from New Jersey. And if you do comedy, everyone knows Ritch Shydner. And I called him and he did my show. He even came to my Super Bowl party and I bought him Diet Coke. It may have even been caffeine free. And my guest is Ritch Shydner. What's up, Ritch?
No, I won't go that far. It's got to have caffeine. I got to have something in it, man.
So I got to talk to you. Let's talk about the history of stand-up comedy. I know you just did a show at Laughing Skull Lounge, and then you're doing one in L.A. Well, tell me where you're doing it in L.A., because I saw you do a storytelling show at our mutual friend Bob Romanis, who played Damone at Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and you slayed it. It was before you came out with your book, and you were there with a little podium, and you read it, and it was a packed house. But tell me about the event coming up in L.A.
Well, this is the Odyssey Theater in Los Angeles, and on December 10th. We just booked it. We just need to get it to showcase it out in LA again, in case someone would decide they want to do a documentary on the history of stand-up comedy. I can't believe they haven't done one yet. Ken Burns did one on jazz, and what are there, 13 fans of jazz in the whole country? And no stand-up comedy documentary yet. It's really incredible. But I love doing it. I started researching it with Phyllis Diller. I became friends with her back in around 86, 87. She called me after like my 3rd Tonight Show or something like that. And we became friends, and she was a fan of the history. We were talking about who's the first stand-up comic. And she said, you should write a book about this, and we both thought it was Mark Twain. Then I'm researching and found out it was this man, Artemus Ward, who taught Twain, how to do stand-up comedy. He was the first stand-up. So I just got into it. And then there were a lot of other things that I found out about. I mean, I've always been thinking about stand-up comedy since I've been doing it, but there were other things. So, it's just great to see in the past. Joke thievery's always been here. The political correctness has always been here. Cancel culture's always been. There's all these things that we think is so new today or so unbelievable. But things have changed over the years too. So it's just fascinating to me. I love it. It's what I did for a living for all those years, and so I love doing it.
So how do you start the research? Because as you said, going back to Mark Twain, it's not like, hey, let's go back to 1950. You're going back, and it is such a vast thing.
Yeah. I had albums. I had a huge album collection, huge, hundreds of albums. And so all these comics, you think, oh, I'm a big deal now. And then you see these albums, you go, this guy thought that he was a big deal back in 1950, whatever, when he had this album out, and nobody knows who he is today. So it always fascinated me, the whole thing. I got into research of it. I read these books about jokes, countless books, joke books. Got into this guy named Gershon Legman, who was a joke chronicler, a dirty joke chronicler. And he had sort of a Freudian approach. He said, what you do in telling jokes, the kind of jokes you like to tell, says something about your character. It says something about your obsessions or fears, just the same as what the country's laughing at in terms of jokes. I'll give you an example. I don't know if I can do this one. I'll try it anyway. You'll tell me, no, you can't do this on this show, and you'll edit it out.
You can do whatever you want. Rich, you can do whatever you want.
The first joke that I ever told, and a friend of mine, she told me, I told it to her on the junior high playground, this dirty joke that I heard. I was fascinated with this joke. And then years later, I realized why. But anyway, here's the joke. A guy's having sex with a woman, and the woman's so big, the guy falls inside her, and he's crawling around in the dark. And he bumps into this other guy, says, hey, buddy, help me find our way out of here. The guy says, help me find my car keys. I'll drive us out of here. Right. So if you look on the face, you go, well, they're slamming women for having, a big vagina. But really, it's the guy expressing his fear that he doesn't have the adequate equipment to satisfy a woman. So that's what it is. And since I'm one of those guys, it's no secret that joke has been my favorite dirty joke for 60 some years.
You know what's funny? You mentioned that, the Chronicle of Jokes. And do you remember, and I got them for Christmas, and I came from a conservative family. My dad was conservative, my mom liberal, and my mom was a Democrat, my dad was a Republican, but they're very waspy. And then they would get, do you remember the Larry Wilde Polish joke books?
I got Larry Wilde books. I got them upstairs. I have a huge, completely finished attic that's just shelves and shelves upon books. I can't even tell you how many joke books I have, but I have Larry Wilde. Of course I do. He had a lot of joke books out.
And they're the ones
about comedians too. He interviewed comedians. He had really good books of interviewing comedians too.
So when you start doing the research for this,
I want to tell you one more thing. One more thing. So that joke that I told you about the guy crawling around inside a woman, right? The big vagina or small penis joke, however you want to call it. That joke was done by the first stand-up comic. In 1864, he got in trouble in Sacramento. It's so unbelievable. I found this joke. Here's the version of that joke in 1864. A farmer and his daughter coming back from town on a horse and buggy, and they've traded in all their crops and everything for goods and money. And the father spots two highway robbers heading for them. He says, quick, daughter, put the money and the goods in that secret place between your legs. And she does. And a few minutes later, the daughter and the farmer are walking on the dirt road. And the daughter says, Father, at least we have the goods and the money for the winter. And he says, yes. And if your mother was here, we'd still have the horse and wagon.
See, that's so funny. It's so funny. And, we talked about this before, how no matter how original you think you are, it's been said. I mean, I was sitting there. I did this. I wrote a joke, and then I saw a meme, and it was a joke. I just told on stage. I said, I saw someone in a smart car drinking smart water on a smartphone, and they drove like a fucking idiot. And then someone sent me a tweet, a message of this thing. And they go, someone took your joke. I'm like, no, because smart. There's so many people, smartphones, it goes together. And it's so funny that people don't get that. You see it on Facebook. I saw someone actually post, she went, oh, someone stole my joke because I said in LA, I'm a 6, but in Ohio, I'm a 9. I'm like, 87,000 people have done that joke. And it's just so funny that these people are so myopic.
Yeah, I know. No, it's true. The only time in terms of human behavior, I have joke books from the 18th century, 1700s. The jokes pretty much are the same between men and women. I can tell you an ancient Jewish joke from like the 16th century. Okay. So where most of the jokes are that men, husbands, don't win the arguments with their wives, right? I mean, most jokes tend to go that way. And when you get into those kind of jokes, so here, there's a joke. I mean, they're the same. The behavior between men and women is pretty much the same. There are differences, obviously, but a lot of things like the women talk more, the men don't talk so much. Those jokes are the same in the 19th century now. They're pretty much the same. But, if there's some technological thing, something new, some new thing come out, then you might find new jokes, truly new jokes. Like Will Rogers, the car comes out, right? So Will Rogers back, and the car becomes really popular in the 20s after Henry Ford drops the price and increases the wages for his workers, and people are buying cars. So he does a car joke. He said, I want to die in my sleep peacefully, like my grandfather, and not screaming and kicking like those other people in his car.
Right.
So that joke was new because they hadn't had cars like that, where that sort of thing. So or the first cameras came out. Cameras came out right during the Civil War. That's when they really came out. Matthew Brady's taking photos. So Artemus Ward, the first stand-up comic, had a joke. The guy's so ugly he broke 5 cameras. Cameras are new, so that's a new joke. He could claim that, but I'm sure other people have knocked it off immediately. But when I was a kid, I remember people using that joke on each other. When I was a kid, you're so ugly, you broke 5 cameras. And how many cameras?
Well, it goes back to that insult humor, even back to like when you watch Welcome Back, Kotter. Oh, you're so low, your mother could crawl under a pregnant ant. It's all old stuff that was done before, but people, it's just like, look at Rodney. And I want you to tell your Rodney story because you have a great story about Rodney.
I got a couple. Oh, you want one about the
but look at Rodney, like yeah, but no, look at Rodney though with the jokes. Like some of them were the same kind of old type joke, and he just made it different.
He did, and he was a great writer. I mean, my wife, she likes to have sex in the back seat when I'm driving. He had to put that's a classic male type of joke. The henpecked husband. Rickles, the greatest insult comic in the world. People kind of forget. He came out on stage, and the first 10, 15 minutes of his act, he just talked about what a henpecked Jewish husband he was. So he beat himself up pretty good before he started attacking the audience. The whole insult humor thing is great. It started with the microphone. There wasn't insult humor before that, because if you try to do insult humor with the crowd, they were as loud as you. And maybe if the heckler was as funny as you might lose the battle. So vaudeville comedians before the microphone didn't mess around with insult humor. Insult humor, once you got power, once that microphone gave the comic the power, then they can start abusing the crowd. That certain comics who had an affinity for it, like Jackie Leonard or Don Rickles.
Now, in your studies, have you found out who was like the first insult comic? I mean, when did this trend start?
Like I said, like when the microphone came along, there was a guy named Frank Fay, horrible human being, terrible anti-Semite, drunk, wife beater, but a very quick-witted comic back in vaudeville, big star back in vaudeville. And MC, he made the MC to star position at the Palace Theater in New York City, which was the sort of the crown jewel of the whole vaudeville circuit back then. So he was great, quick-witted. Milton Berle famously once challenged him to a battle of the wits, and Frank Fay said, "I don't fight an unarmed man." I mean, he was very quick, very insulting. And then Jackie Leonard took it to another level later when he was attacking the whole audience. And once he came out and go, "Welcome opponents." And then he says, "Oh, you people, if Moses had met you, he'd have 10 more commandments." And so he would insult the whole crowd. And then Rickles comes along and he starts picking out individuals. He put a real fear. I mean, but people loved it. I thought, celebrities would show up, and if Rickles didn't insult them, they felt insulted. I mean, they weren't big enough for him to insult. I mean, it was a sort of the difference once somebody wrote, and I read this, between Jackie Leonard and Don Rickles mainly was Jackie Leonard looked like he meant it. And Don Rickles, you knew, was kidding.
Right.
That's a really important part. If you're going to do insult humor, the audience really felt with Rickles that he didn't really mean what he was saying, but he was funny.
Well, I think it comes to also is if people don't get offended if you're somewhat harmless. Like me, I'm an unassuming guy. But I remember the early days of Philly, there was this one guy who was just this not funny guy, had no timing, and he'd look and he'd be dying and go, "So what do you think of that joke, bitch?" to someone in the audience, and the crowd would hate him. Now, if I called someone, if I said to someone, "Hey, don't be such a bitch," they wouldn't be pissed because it's like, "Oh, Steve's like he's a nice guy."
He goes, not only didn't he have any jokes, but he had lousy audience rapport. He doubled down on it. I got terrible jokes, and I don't know how to connect with the audience. I think I'm going far in this business.
Exactly. Now, what got you into comedy? We haven't talked about this for a long time because you were back in the day. You were in law school. You're wearing the Gettysburg shirt. So what happened?
What happened? I got seduced by the laughter, and I joined the circus. It was very simple. Thinking about this today, I'm opening up for Bill Maher in his last special. And I really wanted to, I've known Bill since 1979. I wanted to say something that it's meaningful to both of us before I bring him up. Part of it, what I was thinking today, and I don't know if I'm going to use this or not, but Bill always had a plan. I know comics who came in, they had a plan, they had a vision, not a vision board necessarily, but in a way he did, because he had pictures of Johnny Carson up on his wall, and he had set lists and things up on his wall. He had a plan and a vision, and I didn't. I just had a burn to get on stage, because when I was on stage, the pain stopped. I'll be that honest with you. When I was on stage, I was in a place that my past and my doubts couldn't touch me. And there's no other drug like that I tried them all, and there was nothing like that. Nothing that shut those voices up in my head that told me what I wasn't and what I should be and all that other stuff. It all ended when I got on stage and was making people laugh. So I wanted to stay up there as long as I could. I mean, I used to do 2.5 hour, 3 hour shows back in the early days of the comedy boom, back in the early 80s, before the drunk driving laws changed and the club owners were selling as much booze to the audience as they could. They liked you being up there, but I just burned to be up there. That was my burn, to be up there. It wasn't as I got into the business, I said, well, I better do this if I want to do that. Everybody's doing that. I kind of followed along. I did not have a plan though, and I just
where did you start out though? What was your first night? I think you were in DC, right?
Yeah, I started Washington DC. A guy named Howard Vine, Howard was a classmate of mine in law school. And he said, you're always being funny wherever we are, in class, wherever, you're being funny. And so we came back from a Christmas break, and then January of 77, he takes me through the snow to this coffee house and says, you're going to do comedy. I don't think we knew to call it stand-up. I certainly didn't know it was a set that I was doing. I put together like 5 minutes of stuff. I was always writing things and sending them off to National Lampoon or Mad Magazine and getting them back rejected. I was always sending things to places. So I had some things written down. I went up and tried to perform them, and got one reaction at one point in my, I got heckled. Two guys were playing chess up front, and they just turned on and went, shh, they shushed me. That was my first heckle. and then because I was in there, I was the only comic that night. There were poets, and there were singer-songwriters. There was somebody who went up and did a dance. There was all sorts of talent. And one guy at one point in my little presentation went, huh, like that, like that, started to laugh, but no followed, so he just went,
Cuts it off.
Sorry, you're right, that wasn't funny. And but it was enough. And strangely, thing is, because you're making that transition. I didn't know it, but every comic, you, me, everybody, the first time you go on stage, you make that transition from being funny in the moment around your friends to being funny on demand in front of strangers. So I knew this person that went, huh, like that, had never seen me before, wasn't a friend, and found something I'd said kind of humorous. That was just enough to get me to try it again. And then I kept doing it. I started getting better. And then I even my story. I opened up my first time I opened up for a paying job in Washington D.C. Was the Child Herald in the fall of '78, and I opened up for the Ramones, which I didn't know. It didn't last long. That crowd got rid of me.
Well, yeah. Tell me about that. Like I think knowing the Ramones, the last thing they want to see is a tall blonde guy. And you probably had a suit, you probably had a blazer on, and they probably went up there like, who the fuck
I was in my Jackson Brown period. I had long hair and painter bib overalls, with a t-shirt. But there, it was punk. It was, I'd never seen it. Every angry young man from the DC metropolitan area was there. They were just, it was like, and I got up there. I didn't have a guitar. I didn't hardly had an act. I just had this little A to B to C to D. I didn't have any improv skills, or I didn't write any special punk material. I didn't even know who the band was I was going to open for. And they started throwing beer at me, and I just stood, because I bet the club owner was a drunk, further along the line than I was a drunk. And he bet me double or nothing I wouldn't make 5 minutes in front of him. It was funny to him, and until the beer was flying. And because I was a small little stage, like a 6-inch plywood riser, and beer's flying, and amps are up there, the drum kit. He's back there waving the money. Come get your money, asshole. And I left, man. I didn't, it wasn't like, thank you, good night. I was soaked, man. And I get back, and there's no dressing room. There's just the kitchen behind the bar, right? So I went into the kitchen with the club owner, and the Ramones are standing there waiting to come out. They got their guitars and leather, and the Ramones. And I come back there, and I'm toweling off. I just got beer everywhere. And one of the Ramones looks at me and goes, cool act, man. Like, that's what I do. I go up and people throw beer at me. Beer sales go through the roof when this act goes up. But here's the funny thing to me. So Mark Schiff and I put out this book called I Killed around 2006. You've seen the book. It's all these road stories or showbiz stories, And so we get reviewed by the New York Times. Then the Washington Post says they're going to review it. And then the reviewer, the book reviewer, calls back and says, I can't review this because the music critic at the Washington Post said there was no opening act for the Ramones. And I said, I can't find the guy who was my friend, the bartender. I don't know where he is now. I can't get any proof I don't have any proofs. It bummed me out. And then about a month later, he calls you back and he says, I apologize to you. I want to put the music critic on the line. So he puts a music critic on. The guy goes, I thought there was no opening act, but my wife said, oh, there was a disturbance at the front of the stage. That should have been my, like, if I ever had the first, the comedy special should have been that disturbance at the front of the stage. That was it.
So okay. So you're down there now. When do you make the move to New York? Because back then, was Garvin's around when you're doing it? Was there any club?
So El Brookman's, a place called El Brookman's opened up down in the southeast, and that's where and Lewis Black showed up, and Ron Zimmerman, Kevin Rooney, and all sorts of people, Bill Masters and John Heyman, all these comics who ended up having careers and being writers or comics, and we were doing comedy down there. And then Garvin's in January of 1979 opened, and I became one of the MCs. Andy Evans and I alternated weekends as MCs. And I met all these guys, from New York City. Overton's, he was one of the comics who came down and said, you got to move to New York, And I'd already gone to Los Angeles the previous August of 78. I'd heard about the Comedy Store, so I drove out there. I was clerking for this lawyer in South Jersey, Basil D. Beck. He was great. He was like where the buffalo roams. He was long hair, leather suits in court. Anyway, so he said, look, if you're going to come back here, be my partner, great. But if you're not, you got to figure it out. So take the rest of the summer off, go out to Los Angeles, check this thing out. I went to the Comedy Store and spent a week, 2 weeks in the Comedy Store, the main room. That I don't think the main room was, it was the original room, and I would go down to Westwood, and my friend out there, she was dealing a lot of weed, big weed, and so she'd give me like lots of joints, and I'd just grease the doorman joints to get in, and one day I was talking to, I can't remember who the guy was. For a while I thought it was Sam Kennison, but I don't think it was Sam. I was talking to somebody who was a doorman, and I said, I think I'm not moving out here. He said, don't. I'm going back to wherever he was from. So I'm going back there. I can't get any stage time in LA. I can't get on stage. It's brutal here. So then when I met those guys in New York, 6 months later in 79, they were all saying, come to New York. That's why I just moved to New York. And I just said, that's it. I thought I quit law school, and I did quit law school, but actually ended up getting my degree because I'd had enough credits by then. Weird way that happened. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So I go up there, and I never told anybody I was in law school. I'd been in law school. Never. Because back then, and this is how different it is today, you couldn't get stage time unless you were all in. And I worried that people would think Well, this guy could go be a lawyer. Why would give him any stage time? You know what I mean? Don't give him an opportunity. He has
Well, I had talked to someone, Jamie Keller was on the show last week, and I told him that was like in Philly back in like 88, whatever, at the Comedy Works to the outlet. If some guy came in and said, oh, yeah, I'm doing comedy to get a sitcom, he'd be like, get out of here. You know, this is for comics. This is only comics. We don't want that shit. We want comics.
Yeah, first of all, there's nobody even. When I got there, I didn't know anybody. Maybe Seinfeld had a plan. Some people had plans, but everybody's just trying to be as funny as they were. It didn't matter if you had a plan or not. But today, you know, we had I guess every generation has difficulty getting to the microphone and performing for an audience. And for us, it was finding a place where they'd let you do it. There weren't a lot of places. I mean, I had to talk my way on to these singer-songwriter nights in these pubs in DC to try to get stage time. And I did. I kept pestering them to get on, just because they're like, what are you going to do? I'm going to go up there and do comedy. What is that? What do you mean? We don't have anybody yet. So the audience today, I mean, there's there's more comics that are available audience members today. There's so many people. So the comics who are really serious today, the ones that are going to make it, they have to fight their way through a million amateurs, eternal hobbyists, looky-loos. All these people are hanging around the microphone, and they have to hack their way through the hacks to get to the mic. Remember back in our day, somebody might heckle, they go, don't quit your day job. But if somebody heckles some young comic today, they might go, I have no intention of quitting my day job. I got a 401k and a damn good dental program. I'm just up here for the yucks, you know, and something to do. You know, it's like,
it's a certain breed too. You know, it's sort of, you know, I mean, when I started out, I was so dedicated. It was like, you wanted to get on stage every night, and we would go in Philly, and we go here and we go here, then you go to Northeast Philly, then you'd go to there was a place, the late Big Daddy Graham book called Friendly's Cafe, and you go in and no one wanted to listen to you, but you just sat there and you'd hold the mic, and you know you're getting paid, and you go through it, and your 30-minute act would shrink to 12 minutes because you're getting no laughs and you're speeding up because you're nervous. But we just did it because once you got off stage, you felt like shit. When you have the bad set, you feel like shit. But then when you got in the car and drove home, you were like, all right, now I'm doing this. You know, I'm doing this.
Yeah, it's all, you know, and you know instinctively. I think everybody knows instinctively. It's all a function of stage time. You can't practice stand-up comedy to home by yourself and then come out and do what you practice. Really, you can't. And it's a dance with the audience. It's a dialogue with the audience, and it's the only art form like that. You can practice dancing at home, then come out and then wow them with your dance moves. Your guitar, you can practice at home, come out and kick butt with the guitar. Whatever instrument, acting, you can practice your monologues. Stand-up comedy has to be in front of a live audience. You can't practice it the other way. So you instinctively know you got to do all that stage time. And the more stage time you do, the better you're going to get. Good or bad, whether it's a good audience or not. One person, two drunks, it doesn't matter.
Well, now when do you start getting work in New York? Because I know you ended up being in regular places. I mean, what was that? Was it a short progression or what, how did it happen?
Yeah, you know, so I get up there. I was kind of not grandfathered in. I had so many kind of sponsors among the comics, you know, Glenn Hirsch, Rick Overton at the Improv, where most of the comics that I knew were there. Mark Schiff. They said to Chris Albrecht was the manager. He became the head of HBO years later, but he was the manager of the club. Bud was gone. Bud Friedman was on the West Coast. Silver Friedman had not taken over the New York Improv. He said, you're okay. You're a regular. Which meant you have the ability to hang out. That's all it meant. You know, you pass the audition and hang out. And I hung out like a vulture. I'd come into that bar. The show started, I can't remember, 8:00. Say the show starts at 8. I'm there 10 of 8, just in case the first person does. I'm waiting for someone not to show. Night after night after night. I'd wait there from 8, you know, till 1, 2, 3, when it was hopeless gone, and go back. I had this crazy day job working for these young mobsters, cleaning out apartments in the village, which meant throwing people out, throwing squatters out. It was crazy. And I'm just burning the candle. And one night, Gilbert Gottfried nobody really liked to follow Gilbert. He was so powerful, so good, and so different. He left a crater when he left that stage that comics, you know, couldn't crawl out of, some of them. So one night on Friday night, there were 3 comics. Then there would be a musical act. And then Gilbert had the fourth spot always. He always had the fourth spot. And then the fifth spot was the last paying spot, the fifth spot on the weekends. And then after that, there'd be a second show. But after the second show, it'd just be endless comics. But the paying spots were only 5. And you wanted to get a paying spot. It meant everything to me. I'm hanging out. I don't know how many months this went on or how long or how many weeks. I have no idea. It just felt like forever because I'm not getting on stage and I'm just hanging out. And one night, this guy, Richie Gold, doesn't show up. I knew when I come in, I'd see the lineup, and by then I knew who the players were. If they hadn't been the Garvins, I kind of knew. And I looked at the lineup, and I knew the musical act is on. The musical act is on, and I go, Richie Gold at Gilbert's goes on. Gilbert goes on. Richie Gold is nowhere to be seen. And then I see, I see Chris Albrecht get on the phone, and Howie Klein. They're getting on the phone. They're calling over to Catch. I know what they're doing. They're calling over to Catch. They're calling over to Comic Strip. We need a comic. Send somebody over. They're looking for somebody who's a paid regular, someone established, because they got a packed Friday night audience, first show, and they don't have a comic that's acceptable to them. There's me sitting out in the bar, just me. Because none of the other comics are coming because there's no spot available for them. They know they're not going to go on the first show, but I don't care. I come anyway. You see what I'm saying? None of the late night comics, they'll come to the second show and hang out a little early because they might have to get up earlier in the show than they're planned to get up. But there's nobody coming to the first show because you don't have a chance to get on unless somebody doesn't show up. And Richie Gold doesn't show up. And finally, Chris Albrecht, I'm never afraid, he comes down. Him and Howie Klein come down. I mean, they're like coming down like, can you save the ship? They come down and go, can you hold this audience? And I know exactly what they meant, man. Can I go up there and not bite it so that the audience, I go, yeah. They put me up and I did the job. And they go, I come off, they go, you're paid regular. And as stupid as that sounds now, this is 1979, as stupid as it sounds, I went back to my little dirtball apartment down in the East Village. I was like, yeah. That was a step. And then from then on, they're giving me paid spots. And then I moved, I'd followed Gilbert for a long time. My weekend spots were always following Gilbert. Gilbert did you ever see his Tony comedian? You ever see the character he did, the Tony character?
I don't know. I saw, it's funny is I saw Gilbert when I worked the door at the Comedy Factory outlet. And I remember we were walking and he was walking some of the room, but all his comics were in the back just dying. And there's a special, and I don't think you can find it anymore, but he did a special. It was like on Showtime. God, it must have been 15 years ago. It was all these old jokes. Yeah, it is one of the funniest things. And he starts breaking into the Seinfeld impression. No. And so I'm sitting there. So Jay Leno here. I'm Jay Leno. And he's doing these jokes. It is honestly, I watched that and I was like doubled over in tears. I remember it was when I was in LA. I was on my shitty futon and I had it on the TV and I'm just sitting there and I'm fucking crying because it's so funny.
So he had so many different, he had a bit where he did the whole movie Jaws, but the movie was called Quadra Dick. And he held up a bar stool at his waist with the bar stool legs pointing out. And everything else was as Jaws. This was no boating accident. He did all these different characters as the sheriff, James Mason. He had all these different Ralph Cramden. He did the Ralph Cramden thing before Piscopo and Eddie Murphy. He was doing Norton and Ralph Cramden talking dirty. It was a whole thing. And then he'd do this character, Tony. He put on a bad sport jacket and he did a parody of a bad stand-up comic. But his guy, Tony, is a comic from Brooklyn. Why'd the moron throw the clock out the window? Because he's a fucking moron. Are you listening to me? Are you fucking picking up what I'm saying here? Why'd the chicken cross the road? Who gives a fuck? It's a fucking chicken. Who gives a fuck what the chicken does? Right? And he goes, waiter, there's a fly. Waiter pulls me over and says, hey, there's a fly in my soup. What the fuck do you think I put a fucking fly in your soup? What, is that some fucking joke where you come from? Like I'll risk my fucking job here? And he would deconstruct comedy. So if you came up after him and tried to do your little have you noticed bits or whatever, you'd look hack. So I would just start talking to the crowd. And since the first 3 comics had done Where You From, What You Do for a Living to this touristy crowd, I would just start talking to couples. How long you been a couple? Who said I love you first? And I started doing relationship material out of that. So he forced me to find my way, to find out what works for me comedically.
Now, when did you end up with Dangerfield and Rodney? And how did you end up doing coke with Rodney? Because that is one of my that story still cracks. You're gonna tell the story later. I'm gonna make you tell it about.
I'll tell it now.
No, but no, I have another story you're gonna tell later with the bikers and the knife and
the night doing coke off the night.
Tell the Dangerfield story.
So the Dangerfield, first of all, he was always coming around the clubs. So I worked my way up to being an MC or whatever. When I was on stage, if you're on stage and you in the improv, you look in the back the bar, there was a little light there, and the next comic would poke underneath that light. You could see them to see who to introduce next or whatever, right? Sometimes that's the way it worked. But if you saw Rodney back there, get off as fast as you could. Now, some comics would see Rodney, then they do another joke or two, right? I'd see Rodney and go, and then my dad said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got a special treat." Right? I'd cut right in the middle joke. And Rodney loved it. He'd go, "That kid," he'd walk on stage. I'd be walking, he goes, "That kid knows how to move, man. He knows how to move. Keep an eye on him. He knows how to move." And so he had Dangerfields, of course, that's the 59th and 1st, I think. He didn't use comics back then when I first got there. But in the spring of 80, I think it was, the first time I worked there for him, because they started doing proms, right? You go to your prom, and afterwards, what do? Well, they started doing packages where they'd have these kids from Long Island or wherever come into Dangerfield to see a show as part of their prom thing. And of course, they were just nasty audience. You'd battle them. They're just 17-year-old, 18-year-old drunken kids, horny, drunken, no attention span, looking to F with you at any chance they got. So you just, it was a chair and a whip show, and you just beat them up. And I'd find one. Once you find one that you hit a couple of them, but you hit this one guy and everybody laughs a little harder. You go, okay, this is the guy to beat up. This is the guy for whatever reason. He's the school quarterback, good looking guy, whatever. He's the guy that they want me to beat up, and you beat him up. So one night, I'm at doing one of these shows. It's the midnight show. Rodney, you remember Rodney always wore red tie, white shirt, black suit. He got off stage, he'd take it off and just put his robe on in his club. And he never wore anything under the robe. He was naked under the robe, and he never bothered to close the robe. But anyway, he was sitting in the back of the room watching us battle these kids. I mean, for him, it must have been a kick, thinking about all the toilets he worked when he was a young comic. And one night, the comic in front of me jumped off early. They kind of ran him off. I could see the comic now. And I had to go up early. And then the comic who was supposed to come behind me was late or didn't show something. I ended up doing instead of 15 minutes, I ended up doing 45, whatever, and it's a battle the whole time. It's a battle. And I come off stage and, I always sweat back then anyway, from all the booze and coke I was doing. I was sweating, and Rodney comes up and goes, "Hey kid, man, you got a lot of balls up there, man." Not quite the compliment you're looking for. You're looking for funny. "Hey kid, you're really funny," but I would take balls. That was close enough time, So he goes, "You got a lot of balls. Yeah, you want to do some cocaine?" I'm like, fuck. Doing cocaine with Rodney. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. Absolutely, man. So we go to his office. First of all, he gives me, I used to wear these old suits, old 50 suits and bowling shirts underneath and ties and weird. And Rodney had these ties. I still have 3 or 4 of them. He gave me a big handful of ties. He said, "They give me these ties. You're my friends, your fans. Give me these ties, but they got shit on them, man. I can't wear them. I'll just take these ties." But anyway, we're doing coke, and I'm sitting there with Rodney, and of course you're going to ask him for advice. I ask him for advice. I said, "How can I get better?" He said, "You got to listen to yourself. You got to tape yourself. You tape yourself and listen to your sets." I go, "Nah, I used to, but I can't stand the way I sound." I mean, I can't stand the way I sound. This is the truth. I wasn't lying to him. I can't stand the way I sound. To me, I sound like such an idiot. And I tell him that, and he goes, "Well, of course you're an idiot. You're a comedian. What do you think you are, a brain surgeon? You're a fucking idiot." So he says, "You tape yourself because they'll tell you what's funny. They'll tell you what's funny about you. They're telling you that individually they may be orangutans, but as a group, they're genius." He's talking about the audience, and we're doing coke. First of all, the first thing I noticed about the coke was it was much different coke than I had. It was like celebrity coke. This was great cocaine. The stuff I was snorting was so cut with baby laxative, it kept you more regular than anything else. You'd snort a line and take a dump. But this was good. And the other thing I noticed was that we were snorting the cocaine off a glass table, and every time I bent down to snort a line, I could see Rodney's nuts hanging underneath the table. So that was my real lesson. There's no such thing as free cocaine. But
you got sober.
These stories. I mean, Robert Schimmel had great stories about him, and I had those. And he was just, we loved him. And I think he loved young comics. He loved doing those young comic specials where he broke all those comedians and stars. And I think our generation just loved him.
He was something that you'd watch him and you go, wow, I remember having this cassette, and then even watching the movies like Easy Money and stuff like that. You just liked him, and I think because it was like he was an underdog somewhat, and I don't know what it is. It just you associated with him.
If you read his book, I mean, he had a real Dickensian childhood. It was really horrible. He got abused, and but he was true to himself. And Rodney was, I mean, every generation, there may be one older comic that everybody kind of latches onto for different reasons. And Rodney, that's very rare that an older comic will attract a younger generation. I mean, Carlin obviously did it. He was so powerful, so truthful, and so funny. And Rodney, he sort of represented the hypocrisy or the illusion of the American dream, right? You can be anything you want. Steve, you could be president. Richie, you can be anything you want. No, you can't. And Rodney, with that, loser attitude and mentality, he sort of parried it. He parodied the whole thing. And I think that's why our generation loved him so much, because we kind of knew the American dream was getting a little tarnished by the time we came along. And then Lewis Black is like that for the younger generation behind him. Lewis, to me, this is just my opinion. Lewis he's ranting. He's a great ranter. He's a great ranter. And he kind of represents younger people's parents. He represents my generation, this older, sitting at home yelling at the TV like a poodle barking at a freight train. The impotence of our generation, yelling and screaming about things and not being able to do anything. And he gets apoplectic. I think he kind of parodies the young people's parents pretty well.
Now, drugs were such a big part of that comedy back then. And where were you when? You hear about it though. I mean, Rodney did everything. Where were you when you met the bikers?
Oh, that was South Carolina. So South Carolina. I always had cocaine, but being an addict, if I could do your coke first, that would help. That would help the situation. So. I come off stage one day, and this happened all the time, that people would want to do coke with a comic, or that people would just sometimes just pass me coke, they'd palm it to me, and I'd look at, there's a gram there, or something. It was amazing. So these two guys, I come off stage and go, hey man, you want to party with us, man? Come and party with us. We go to the bathroom, of course, three guys in the stall. That if there's any kind of 80s logo, right, that should be three guys in a bath stall. Right? It's like, to me, and it's like, I remember once somebody yelled at me on stage. I was drinking a Diet Coke. They go, that stuff's terrible for you. I said, yeah, really? I used to snort cocaine off of urinals, man, in bathrooms. What are you talking about? I don't know how many times I'd be standing there and some guy next to you taking a piss, and the guy next to you is knocking cocaine down on the top of your urinal. Yeah, I'll just snort it right off of that. I mean, well, sure. But anyway, to these guys, first of all, they had tattoos. Now, I didn't know anything about prison tattoos. This was like 1982, something around there. South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Punchline. And they got prison tattoos. So I didn't even realize that. And then they start telling me, we're doing coke. And they're going, we got prison stories, man. You're going to love our stories. We got so many, we got chicks. We got all these chicks back there waiting for us, man. Come back to our house and party with us. I'm like, yeah, man. And they had a sandwich bag half filled with cocaine, and they got a buck knife, folding buck knife, big buck knife, and they're just digging in there, and I'm snorting it off there. Now I don't even see it or feel it. I don't see it because there's no mirror in the bathroom, but I don't feel it because my face is so numb with cocaine. But they're just jabbing it underneath my nose. They're just jabbing the top of my lip. They jab it. I snort it off there. They get some more out of it. Later on, I got like 20, at least 20 little jab, blood all down, caked down. I got blood on. But I don't see this at the time. We're just doing cocaine, and they go, let's go to our place. I go, yeah. So we walk out of this bathroom, and the guys who own the club down there, one of the part owners of the club was a state prosecutor attorney. He was part of the state prosecutor's office. And I come out, and the manager and one other guy, another attorney, defense attorney, say, "Hey, Ritch, your wife's on the phone." My wife is on the phone in New York. I say, "Well," I'm like, "Nah, tell her I'll call her later. I'm on research and development right now." Like that's what I used to say whenever I go off with a couple of weirdos to do drugs. I'm doing research and development. I'm hoping I can find something that would be useful in my comedy act. Yeah, right? Yeah. So they're like, no, you got to talk to her. It's an emergency. So I go in the back. I said, "Guys, wait right out." I go in the back. They go, "You can't go with those guys. There's state troopers, undercover guys right now. Found them. It looks like they killed two drug dealers. They've killed two drug dealers. They just got out of prison. They killed two drug dealers. They're just collecting the evidence right now. They're going to arrest these guys any minute. They're going to arrest them as soon as they get all the evidence in order." And I'm like, "Oh God." They go, "You stay right here now, and we'll tell them you can't come out, that your wife's in the hospital." And they went out and told these guys, "Hey, his wife's in the hospital. He's going to fly up to New York City on a special helicopter," whatever they told him, And they left. And the next day, in the Columbia, whatever the paper was, the Columbia State Journal, whatever it was, I open it up, and there it is. Two guys suspected of murder were arrested in the early morning hours with three young women. They named the young women, like they're 19, 18, whatever. These young women they had. And they found a large amount of narcotics and the murder weapon. And I could have been sitting there with them. And, what was I going to go like, "Hey, I'm just a comedian, guys. I'm just a comedian." They hauled them all away.
So when did you get sober? I know you've been sober for a while. And what was the point that made you get sober?
Well, I tell you the thing that, every you're talking about in 1985, I got sober March. And then I went back out for some more reconnaissance, and then came back, and I've been sober since May 11th, 1985. And what I lost, and the weird thing about alcoholism or drug addiction, it's the only time the diagnosis matters is when you make it. You have to call yourself that. You have to want to do something about it. I knew I was an alcoholic before I knew I was an alcoholic. And for months before I got sober, maybe a year or two, I was telling everybody I got a problem. Anybody who drank or did drugs with me, I would tell them I got a problem. And a lot of them found out the hard way. They'd be going to bed thinking that they left 2 grams of Coke out there for the next night, and they'd come out the next morning, and I'd be like, "Coke's gone, man. I told you I got a problem. You shouldn't have left it with me." So I had lost my sense of humor. I had really lost my sense of humor. And Sinbad. You know who Sinbad is. Remember Sinbad, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I worked with Sinbad down in Texas. We did the Texas prison had a rodeo with the prisoners. Did you know that? It was in the Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder movie.
Okay.
What he did together. Well, we go down there. I get hired to do a show for the prisoners and these other officials and all. They have a show for them after they do the rodeo, right? And a dinner and a show. So I'm the comic, and Sinbad is hired. I don't know who put us together, but Sinbad and I put together. We did that. Then we did a couple one-nighters driving from wherever that was. I can't remember where the state prison was, to Austin, Texas. And we do a week at Austin, Texas. And I'm drinking so much and doing so much blow. And Sinbad is running me off the stage. Nobody had put a strain on me. I mean, it wasn't like, this is early 85, whatever it was, but nobody had made me work harder than Sinbad. And he was just having fun. And I wasn't having fun. I was gripping. I was angry, and my nerves were frayed. Everything that at the end of your drinking and drugging causes you to be. I was short on everything. And I found nothing funny. I wasn't writing anything new. I'd lost the spark of my humor. I remember sitting in the bar one night at the last night of the show, right? And Sinbad didn't drink all week. And I was sitting there at the end of one end of the table, and you'll get this. He's at the other end of the table, and I'm constantly going in the bathroom to do blow. I got some crazy woman with me, of course. And I'm smoking cigarettes and drinking and looking at Sinbad, the other end of the table. Everybody's gravitated toward him. I'm the headliner. They're all kind of leaned down there. Sinbad's telling stories and laughing and having fun, drinking Coca-Cola. And I thought, he's what I used to be. He's what I want to be. And what's the difference here? It's not that he's young and I'm a little older than him. It's not that he's black and I'm white. It just struck me. He's not drinking. Now, it took me a couple months after that before I finally could get the help I needed, and before I was willing to go to get the help where I could get it. But that was a big moment for me, sitting there. And I always remember Sinbad for that. And anytime I've seen him, I thanked him.
Now, what was it like once you got sober, getting on stage? Because it has to be different, because, you know, I never performed under the influence. Okay. I got wasted after, but I always went on stage sober, because I always looked at it as, this is my job. I would not go to my job wasted. So, and I never wrote. I remember I was doing a gig at the Casbah in Wildwood, and I was smoking pot after a show. And I just know the stupid bit, and we were just stoned. And I said, how, like, oh yeah, Roseanne Barr, you know, put someone airbrushed a hoagie, something stupid, and we're laughing. So the guy goes, do that joke the next night. So I'm having a good set. I do that joke. Makes no sense. The crowd looks at me like I'm a fucking idiot. Until I never wrote under the influence, because I always, you know, my mind thinks differently. But for you, what was it like when you started writing your act and getting on stage sober? Was it scary?
Oh yeah, man. And this is why I always love Bud Friedman and will always thank him. So I'm at the Improv, and I'm doing what I need to do to stay sober. I'm not drinking, I'm not doing drugs, but I am having a difficult time performing. Now, you know, part of it was I didn't perform under the influence, and sometimes accidentally would happen, but I really loved the purity of being up there, and I didn't want anything messing with it, and I didn't trust myself to be able to perform well under the influence. So I didn't perform well, and I didn't perform under the influence, but I always had drugs in my pocket, and I knew I was going to have drinks at the end of the show afterwards, right? Now I don't have that. I'm angry. I'm physically detoxing in some ways. I know in some ways, because I didn't sleep for nights and I was sweating, and I'm still trying to go on stage, and I'm walking off, man, angry. I'm throwing the mic down, not like in a cool mic drop. And one night, a friend of mine who became a real good friend of mine, he was in the audience checking out comedy. He hadn't started it yet. He was newly sober himself. He laughed. Nobody's laughing. I'm bombing, Steve. I'm bombing. And he laughs. And I turned to him. I go, what are you laughing at? he goes, oh, wow, man. He goes, I thought it was a comedy club. I don't know. You know, he said, I turned on him so fast. Like, what are you laughing at? You know, that was like, I was angry. And I'd walk off stage, and I'd be going out, and Bud Friedman would be standing there by the door. He says, see you tomorrow night, 11, Ritch. See you tomorrow night. These were primetime spots. Now, I was getting them before. I was getting them those spots before I quit drinking, and Bud kept giving them to me until I caught on. And I did catch on. I did start performing better. Not crazier, but better. And, I mean, I got tapes of me when I was drinking and using, and I got one that's special they did out at the Comedy Castle in Detroit that my wife found and just saw. I never saw it. It was a professional tape. They did it to try to sell a special. Mark Ridley, who owned that club, in January of '82. I tell you, I come out there, I scared the audience, man. I literally scared them, man. And then I made them laugh, and I wore them out. I'd always wear them out, and it was great. But I mean, I was nuts. You could just see it. And it took me a while though, but I came back to where I really loved it more than ever.
Now, another story you got to tell me, because this always cracks me up. And you've told me the story before you started stage. You have to tell me, and I don't know what year it was, when you did the Mike Douglas show, and Diane.
Oh no, Merv Griffin. Merv Griffin. This goes back with the sobriety. So, you know, my second Tonight Show, my first Tonight Show was great. They said, you come back in a month, right?
Sober? Were you sober your first show?
No, but I managed to quit drinking and drugging a week before. I managed to grip it. This is like August '84. And then the second one, I'm hanging out with Sam Kinison too much. And I can't, I think I managed not to do cocaine the night before I did the Tonight Show, but I was hungover when I got to the place. When I got to the NBC studios, for the whatever they taped the show. I can't remember. It was 5:30, 4:30, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I talked Jim McCauley into letting me change the end of my bit. Sam was saying, you got edgier material than the stuff you're ending with. You know, they would lock in the material for the new comics like me. And I managed to talk McCauley into let me change. Now, my first idea was to do a bit that I newly started doing, was Jesus talking to his agent. He says, you're not going to do that on the Tonight Show. So then I talked to him, let me do some jokes about the guy, Barney Clark, the first artificial heart recipient. I don't know if you remember that. This was back in like 84 or something. He had an 800-pound machine pumping his heart. I mean, that's an artificial heart, literally, but it was 800-pound machine outside of his body. And one of my jokes was, they said this machine may affect his social life. I go, definitely going to affect his bowling. He's got 3 guys pushing this 800-pound machine down the lane with him. Come on, faster, faster. You're affecting my, you know. And Johnny Carson hated it. I got banned from the Tonight Show. He hated it because it was all about heart attacks. I did jokes about the defibrillator. I mean, he was a 4-pack-a-day smoker. He had a mortal fear of heart attacks. So I am not getting back on. So finally, I get sober. A year later, McCauley sees me at the Improv. He comes up to me and says, you are totally different than you were a year ago. I mean, your whole attitude. I love this new material. Go get you back on. I said, great. He said, first, you got to do a Merv Griffin. Like, you know, like in baseball, Steve. They send me down to the minors for reassignment,
Right.
A rehab gig. He said, go there, and then I'll give you a date for the Tonight Show. All right. So give me a Merv Griffin a week from then. He calls up Merv Griffin show, and they said, yeah, we used to book Ritch. I'd done it a dozen times, Merv Griffins, you know. So, okay. I get over there that day. Les Sinclair's the booker. Merv Griffin comes up to me and says, listen, I got to tell you, this audience is all old people from a Jewish old folks home, you know, Jewish retirement home. I'm like, why is he telling me this? I've got a Merv Griffin set. Couldn't be safer. Nothing, you know. I never would do anything anti-Semitic anyway, but I mean, I don't even know why he's telling me this. It didn't make sense until we get back to the curtain. Diane Cannon's out there, the actress Diane Cannon, and she's promoting her new movie. It's called Jenny's War. And they show a clip, and it's her in a concentration camp being beat up by Nazis. World War II movie. And then the clip stops, and Merv goes, that's powerful work, Diane. Let's bring out our next entertainer. And they introduced me. And I mean, I might as well have goose stepped out onto that stage, man. I'm blonde hair, blue eyed. Here comes the jokes. You will laugh at the jokes. Jordan. And I mean, they're in shock. They are in shock. And I do my first joke. I get nothing. And I remember Jerry Seinfeld said, if you ever are performing on a talk show and you drop a joke, it doesn't get a laugh. Just stare at the lead camera, nod your head and pause for a second, smile. To give them a chance that they'll put in the laughter later. So just pace it for the laughter. I did that every joke. Every joke, I got nothing. Every joke, I do the joke and I look at the audience, and then I look at the camera and I go, and just couldn't. And my mind's going, bail on this, man. Start doing some crowd work or something, you know. Start singing some songs from camp or something. I don't know, whatever. And I bombed so bad I walked off. And Les Sinclair was all apologetic. I'm sorry. I tried to get Diane to change spots with you because I knew this was not going to be a good follow. I'm so sorry. And I was like, I'm done, man. I mean, that was my rehab back. That's like, you know, the Phillies send you down there to do a rehab and you get 12 home runs in half an inning. You know, I mean, what the hell's? And about a week later, Jim McCauley, the Tonight Show booker, comes up to me and says, I heard about the Merv Griffin thing. I'm like, oh, man, this is it. And he goes, you took your beating like a man. You're very professional. You know, you didn't bail on them. They'll put the laughs in later. And here's your Tonight Show set. He gave me my next Tonight Show shot. I went on to do 12 more Tonight Shows. I'm on Johnny's greatest stand-up comics. I mean, that put one of my sets on there. I mean, I had a great thing with Carson after that. But I bombed. And I tell the story, comics don't believe it. They go, you bombed and then got to Tonight Show? I go, yeah, that's right. That's what happened. And here's the follow-up. Here's the follow-up, Steve. I have that tape. So you can see me doing a joke and smiling. And then they do audience cuts and there's nobody laughing. They're all like, they're on shock. So where's the laughter coming from? You know what I mean? Because nobody's laughing.
Well, I got to tell you, Rich, I like to keep my show to an hour. You got to come back in a few weeks because I always like talking to you. You got so many good stories. Now, what are you up to now? I know you're working with Bill. What's going on with you now?
That's it. I just want to write, and I want to do this stand-up history show. I'd like to somehow get somebody to want to do it as a. There's 4 parts that I've written out. 4 episodes per documentary. Could be a 4-part documentary, stand-up history show. Other than that, I just want to write. I don't see myself doing much stand-up beyond opening up for Bill. Bill's ending his live performances. It might be a good time for me too. But I love writing, and obviously I love talking because I don't think you got in 3 words with me. I'm sorry.
That's always, no, that's always, now here's a question I always like to ask people because you've had a good career. You know, we didn't even get into the Married with Children stuff, and we didn't get in with there's so much you've done and writing for Roseanne. We'll get in that another time.
Okay.
But when you look back at your career and your life, what makes you proud? What are you proud of? You know, when you're how old are you now?
71.
So you've been a working comic since you were what, 21, 22?
No. I started first time on stage. I just turned 24, and when I moved up to New York, I was 26.
Okay. So you've been in the business for a long time.
Yeah.
When you look back at your life, you know, besides, I'm sure you know your kids and your wife and all that, but what makes you proud? What makes you proud when people say, "Man, you know, Ritch Shydner"? What do you want people to remember you for?
I didn't cheat the audience. I never cheated the audience. If I was sick, I gave it my best shot. I never cheated the audience. You know, I do jokes about bombing, but I gave it everything I had. And that comes from, I come from a blue collar town, Pennsville. You've been there. There's a work ethic there that I saw all my friends' dads. My dad had that work ethic, and he wasn't blue collar, but he had that work ethic. And I think that's it. I wouldn't want people from my hometown going, hey, he just went up there and he tanked it. He didn't really care. So I don't want to. I think that's the most thing. If I had anything to say, just talking about my career, he gave his best shot. That's what he gave his best shot.
That's fair enough. So people go see. Do go to YouTube, find the Ritch Shydner. He's you had that show. You just you taped a special in Florida, right? You taped something down there in Florida.
Yeah. Open bar comedy. I think there's things on Instagram with open bar comedy, and Ron Feingold. They did a great job. I cut my hair. And I had like one pocket out. I thought that'd be funny if I just left the pocket out, you know, like a jacket pocket turned out. But people were just distracted by it. They go, why has he got his pocket out? My hair, I had like Irwin Corey. It was my Irwin Corey look, right? I had this nutty professor hair, old man, straggly hair, and a pocket out. I thought it would add to the funny, but it just made me look more confused.
So people go check out Ritch. Go check out my past episodes. Go to Comedy Trainwreck, and I want to thank Jimmy Corhan for producing this. Go to see Comedy Trainwreck. They got some great shows on there. Coleman Green, Ed McGonigal, Corey Alexander. Go to YouTube, look up the Coop Tank. That's my business podcast. I host a panel of 3 different local business people, and we talk about industry and what motivates them and what makes them tick. Also, if you go to coopertalk.net. You can find some old episodes of me and Ritch there. You can find 1,028 episodes. You know, I've had over 60 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on there. So check that out. And if you're in South Jersey, don't forget to go to the Laurel Lanes and Splits Bar and Grill. Every once in a while during the Philly season, I would stop by there for a $1 hot dog and a $2.50 Yingling. You can't beat it. So go check them out at laurelLanesNJ.com. I'm Steve Cooper. I want to thank you. You can email me at coopertalk.net, and we will talk to you next time.
Coops Comedy Corner. Coops Comedy Corner.